On the morning of May 15, a day after Israeli soldiers shot and killed more than 60 largely unarmed Palestinian protesters on the Gaza-Israel border and injured thousands more, Joel Dorfler, a history teacher at New York City's elite Riverdale Country School, decided to post the New York Times front-page headline and accompanying photos in the hallway outside his classroom. Israelis killed dozens in Gaza, read the headline, to which Dorfler added a personal note: I support Palestinian human rights. Dorfler, now 74 years old, had been a member of the faculty at Riverdale for more than 25 years, heading the history department since 1992. He often taught an elective course covering the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, and his politics weren't a secret. I'll believe that corporations are people when Texas executes one, read a sticker plastered on the front of his classroom door. I had him as a teacher years ago, at Columbia Prep. He was a lefty then, too, unabashed but never dogmatic about it and certainly never dismissive of any argument from the other side of the aisle. He welcomed opposing views, and he made his work for the ones we might have shared with him. Dorfler introduced Paulo Freire's Pedagogy of the Oppressed, and we spent a year delving into Third World economic dependency theory. He had a wry sense of humor and never handed out an easy A, which made some students want to earn his approval all the more. From what I gathered in talking to a number of his recent pupils, little about my old teacher had changed. Dorfler, who is Jewish, didn't push any political doctrine so much as he inculcated in his students a powerful desire to understand how the world works, by whatever lights they preferred. Dorfler at Columbia Prep in the late 1980s, from the author's yearbook. When Dorfler posted the Times headline, he wasn't doing anything terribly out of the ordinary. The strange part came next. A small but vocal minority of pro-Israel students responded by putting up a slew of articles and handwritten post-it notes all around the perimeter of Dorfler's initial posting, practically enveloping it. Over the course of the next 2 days, the tone and tenor of the responses, including memes, grew more openly anti-Palestinian and then explicitly anti-Arab. One student said some of the articles on the wall were culled from ultra-conservative sites. Multiple sources described the later postings as Islamophobic. It was, they said, as charged a political atmosphere as they'd ever experienced on campus. The outrage metastasized, quickly swallowing up another teacher in the history department, Sean Redden. A select group of parents got involved. A New York City tabloid took up the cause. And soon what began with a headline and a few photos posted on a wall outside a Bronx classroom would come to involve a multi-million-dollar Jewish advocacy organization and a number of influential supporters of Israel. Those influential parents, who collectively have donated vast sums to Riverdale in recent years, met in private to lobby highly receptive school officials, including the board's chair, David Weston, the former president of ABC News, and worked to shape and then dominate the agenda of a more public parents' meeting in June. It was during that latter meeting that Riverdale's culture war exploded into the open. Parents aired a number of long-simmering grievances, claiming some of their children were being unfairly persecuted and laying out a vast, unfounded conspiracy of leftist indoctrination and speech suppression on the part of the faculty. At one point in the meeting, some teachers were likened to a tumor that required immediate removal. At another, Dorfler himself was compared to a white supremacist. Someone even invoked the Me Too movement, analogizing the teachers to powerful predators. And throughout, they treated any criticism of Israel or its current government as equivalent to anti-Semitism. It was the playbook of Israel's staunchest defenders, adapted to a prep school setting. The wall outside Joel Dorfler's classroom on May 18. Names have been blacked out. By mid-June it was all over. Dorfler had quit in protest, and Redden, who'd been out on paid leave since May despite enjoying the support of a group of students and a larger group of alumni, was resigned to never teaching at Riverdale again. The saga was a parable of political correctness as it more commonly exists in America, beyond the apoplexies of mainstream pundits. for all of the coverage devoted to the supposed assaults on free speech perpetrated by the left on college campuses and the honking claims of persecution by the right, the real threats to liberal ideals within the academy come from the influential and powerful people who can demand that a school stand in lockstep with their political agendas or risk losing out on their largesse. There was something in all of this that an acolyte of Doerfler's might grimly appreciate. Students at Riverdale had gotten an excellent lesson in how the world really works. Sacred Spaces Riverdale Country School, founded in 1907, sprawls across 27.5 acres in the affluent Riverdale suburb of the Bronx. The 1,100 students or so who constitute the lower, middle and upper schools have access to an enviable range of facilities, close to a dozen academic buildings, multiple tennis courts, a regulation football field, a greenhouse, performing arts spaces, science-specific labs and a massive 13,000-square-foot indoor aquatic center, recently built to replace the old pool named after the family of Steve Mnuchin, an alumnus and the current Secretary of the Treasury. The academics are rigorous, and admission isn't cheap, with the cost of tuition and other expenses exceeding $50,000 per year. The school also has a $63.3 million endowment, per Riverdale. Former and current students alike speak of the school as a place where intellectual curiosity is valued above all else. I talked to a dozen or so members of the Riverdale community in all. They were unanimous in their assessment of the campus and its intellectual climate, though something of the current climate was also suggested by the fact that all but one insisted on anonymity, for fear of reprisals. Additionally, some current parents are worried that if they spoke publicly, the administration might retaliate by damaging their child's college admission prospects down the road. Whatever their present anxieties, Riverdale students are personally invested in the school's greatness, as a recent alumnus put it. Politically, the school tends toward a cosmopolitan liberalism, though the administration works diligently to ensure that all sides of any hot-button issue are given a full hearing. Prior to the 2012 election, New York Times columnists Charles Blow, whose two children attended Riverdale, and Ross Douthat were invited to speak. But teachers and the administration are more than willing to praise and encourage activist efforts, such as a video shared on Riverdale's Instagram page this March celebrating students who staged a walkout to demand tighter gun control legislation. Riverdale was quick to respond earlier in the 2017-18 school year when the campus was rocked by two incidents of direct racist provocation. Someone scrawled the N-word on the wall of an African-American teacher's classroom. A month later, a swastika was found on a bathroom stall, per emails sent by the administration and obtained by HuffPost. In both cases, the administration made it abundantly clear that the vandalism was beyond the pale and would not be tolerated. During Riverdale's 2018 graduation ceremony, Shelby Stokes, the teacher whose classroom had been vandalized, spoke movingly about the incident, a violation, she said, of what I consider to be a sacred space. Students rallied around her, in a way that mended the hole in my spirit, she said in her speech, a video of which was viewed by HuffPost. She recalled the multicolored post-it notes of affirmation and love that filled her office. She drew on the work of Paulo Freire. Freire tells that love is a commitment to others and that it must generate acts of freedom, she said. You cannot have known how you freed me from a crushing sense of self-doubt. I will be forever grateful for your intervention. Her speech painted a portrait of a warmly supportive environment in which teachers learn from students as surely as students learn from teachers. As Doerfler would himself learn, though, there are limits to Riverdale's soft progressivism. After he posted the headline and photos, the hallway outside his classroom became a hub for hotly contested conversations about Israel and Palestine. Over the next 2 days, the furor continued unabated. Maybe 50 students in total, approximately one-tenth of the middle and upper school, regularly engaged in debates around the wall, with participation increasing as the week went on. And while some of the conversations were respectful, the loudest voices belonged to the pro-Israel students, some of whom asserted that supporting Palestinian protesters was the equivalent of supporting Hamas, ISIS, even terrorism in general. One such example on the wall, per multiple sources, was a quote that has been attributed in numerous publications to former Israeli Prime Minister Golda Meir, but its provenance is questionable. Peace will come when the Arabs will love their children more than they hate us. A similar, handwritten but unattributed post-it note on the wall read, Arabs need to stop loving their bombs and start loving each other. Some have suggested that this wall was a healthy dialogue, wrote Kelly Nicholson Flynn, Riverdale's head of upper school, in an email to students and staff, while others have suggested that the anonymous postings were deeply problematic. For his part, Redden posted on the door of his classroom the names of the Palestinians who had been killed and also Amnesty International's article likening Israel's actions to war crimes. Like Dorfler, it wasn't hard to deduce where Redden landed on the political spectrum. In 2011, Redden was participating in the Occupy Wall Street protests at Zuccotti Park and insisting on more concrete demands. Like Frederick Douglass said, power concedes nothing without a demand, he said, according to the New York Times. One student, a rising senior at Riverdale, told me about a run-in with a group of other students. This was May 17, 2 days after Dorfler's posting. After leaving a bioethics class, the student approached the wall and, staring at Meir's probably apocryphal quote, said sotto voce, to no one in particular, these Jewish kids. Before finishing the thought, the student was surrounded by a handful of male students, 5 or so, who screamed, racist, in front of the student's face over and over again. The encounter lasted 2 to 3 minutes, by the student's recollection. The group dispersed, and the student was left in tears. A classmate who was present backed up the student's account. In recalling the incident, the student expressed deep regret for having explicitly criticized Jewish students, saying it was wrong to have done so, especially when there was no way to determine who was responsible for the postings in question. But the student also remembered having felt stunned and unable to respond while under attack. I felt shocked and powerless, the student said. Never before had the student felt so explicitly targeted. Riverdale is becoming a more and more foreign place to me, the student said. Later that Thursday night, another student sent an email to Kelly Nicholson Flynn, the head of upper school. In the email, which was obtained by HuffPost, the student made it clear that the wall had sparked few, if any, productive conversations. Pro-Israel students, however, were exhibiting racist tendencies, the student wrote, posting racist remarks, and sharing decidedly anti-Arab articles. The student also asked that the school make a definitive statement condemning these posts, as they had done in October and November in response to the racist vandalism. Realizing the situation was becoming untenable, the administration jumped in. Nicholson Flynn sent an email addressed to all upper school students and Riverdale employees on the morning of May 18, decrying the use of both anti-Arab and anti-Semitic language and suggesting that students consult the upper school student handbook to see if any of the behavior during the past week constituted harassment. If so, the incidents would be fully investigated, Nicholson Flynn promised. This was well-intentioned but curious. No anti-Semitic material had been posted on the wall, sources told me. Save for Redden's posting on his classroom door, all the material affixed to the wall by students was supportive of Israel. If Nicholson Flynn meant that anti-Semitic opinions had been expressed verbally, she did not make any such a distinction in the email. And the wall itself, in her view, was a matter open to debate. Some have suggested that this wall was a healthy dialogue, Nicholson Flynn wrote, while others have suggested that the anonymous postings were deeply problematic. In her note, she announced a new policy with regards to the wall or any material posted on campus. They would have to be signed by a student, student group or faculty member. If not, they would be removed. The email then went on to outline what the administration felt was the best path toward building a climate that supports dialogue, including a series of meetings with interested students. By the end of the day, all of the postings were taken down. But the tension had not solely been confined to the hallway. There were classroom arguments, as hinted at by the New York Post. I heard about one such encounter from a source favorable to Redden. On May 17, a student in a freshman class supposedly told Redden that posting the Amnesty International article and names of the Palestinian victims on his door was tantamount to supporting terrorists. Several weeks later, at a parents' meeting, the mother of a Riverdale student would allege that a teacher screamed and banged on the table while not letting my son speak his views. The parent was almost certainly talking about Redden and the May 17 incident. The source disputed the parent's version of events while acknowledging that the exchange was indeed tense. Voices were raised, but no one struck any tables. The student in question aired his views, and the conversation became more measured as the class as a whole discussed what life is like in Gaza, which is under a crippling Israeli blockade, and what a United Nations panel has likened to apartheid rule. 2 million Palestinians have to survive with only 3 to 4 hours of electricity per day, Redden pointed out, according to the source, and 97% of the water is undrinkable. By the end of class, the source said, Redden and the student were on amicable terms. Then, on May 18, during his mock trial elective, Redden was leading a discussion of the events of 1947-48, specifically the removal of over 700,000 Palestinians from Israel. A senior female student, who is Jewish, stood up and announced that she would not remain in class, according to 3 sources who were in the room, all of them sympathetic to Redden. The teacher told the student to remain seated. Should she choose to leave, Redden told her, it would impact her final grades. She bolted the classroom anyway, slamming the door behind her. Redden was on a scheduled paternity leave the following week. His wife had recently given birth to the couple's second child, but on May 23, he was informed by Dominic Randolph, Riverdale's head of school, that he would be placed on paid leave, pending an investigation. It would emerge later that someone had accused Redden of saying, all Israelis are terrorists during mock trial on May 18, an allegation he vehemently denies. I would never have said that, because it is not what I believe, Redden, whose wife is Jewish, told the Forward. I was providing historical context in response to the many allegations posted on the wall of the building where I teach, and among some students, equating all Palestinians, indeed, all Arabs, with terrorists. 2 students who were in the mock trial elective at the time of the incident backed up Redden's account. The claim that Mr. Redden stated, Israelis are all terrorists is a complete fallacy, one of the students told HuffPost via email. I firmly believe that no teacher has attempted to allow students to consider all sides of an argument as Mr. Redden has, the student continued. He is outspoken and passionate, and that's what makes him one of the greatest teachers that Riverdale has. Randolph told Redden that the investigation would be completed the following week, after the long Memorial Day weekend. Redden had already been scheduled to take a sabbatical during the following fall semester. But via email, he confirmed that he will not be returning to Riverdale. I welcome the time with my 5-month-old son, and I'm excited to get back in the classroom soon, said Redden, who declined to comment beyond his email. Because of Redden's scheduled absence the following week, it took time for word to trickle down to the faculty and student body. Discourse was had in the meantime, sustained, in-person dialogue about the current situation in the Middle East, among students and invited faculty members. That's how Nicholson Flynn put it in an email. According to a student who attended one such session, the conversation centered on the meta-question of why the Israeli-Palestinian conflict is a challenging subject. Amid all the uncertainty, students began to rally in support of their now absent teacher. A 20-page single-spaced dossier with personal testimonials from a dozen students was presented to the administration. They also sent a group email praising him to the rafters as both a teacher and mentor, and decrying the lack of information about his job status, especially since, per the email, a board meeting to determine Redden's fate was imminent. Mr. Redden stands out as one of few Riverdale community members who truly champions dialogue and explores all sides of an argument, the email stated. Mr. Redden sets out to encourage this behavior in us, his students, every day, at Riverdale. In response, Randolph, the head of school, sent this email on May 30th. I deeply respect your writing this message to me and understand your feelings in regard to Mr. Redden, a teacher whom I also admire and respect. I know that he is a very important figure in this community for many students and other teachers. At the same time, several incidents happened that are concerning. We are looking into those incidents and will decide what happens. We have clear expectations for our community members, and hold people accountable to those expectations. A student who co-signed the support email found Randolph's response to be enervating and disheartening. We felt so powerless, the student said. Because we recognized that at the end of the day the administration and the parents who fund this school have the power. A group calling itself Students for Redden was formed. Members put up posters on the walls in support of their teacher on June 6 and then again on June 7. The administration quickly took them down, despite the fact that they were signed. Per Nicholson Flynn's emailed directive, no current Riverdale teacher was willing to speak with HuffPost. Reached by phone, one faculty member, in a flat, affectless voice, said that any questions should be directed to Randolph, then quickly ended the conversation. Their jobs are at stake, the member of Students for Redden said of the faculty. The administration has proven time and time again that they're willing to listen to parents who want these teachers fired. What the bulk of the student body did not know is that their activism paled in comparison to the work of a far more influential group operating behind the scenes to determine not just Redden's fate but Dorfler's. These individuals had larger goals in mind, too, than jettisoning a couple teachers. They sought to impose their vision on all Riverdale teachers and bend the school's curriculum to their will. Tolerance for Hate. On May 21, Tal Kainan, the Israeli-born founder of Clarity Capital, emailed 4 other Riverdale parents with a draft of a letter that he planned to send to Randolph. He was requesting comments and possible additions. The bulk of the draft, which was obtained by HuffPost, concerned the last week's campus discussion of events in the Middle East, and the students who were silenced, and experienced unprovoked and angry rants about Israel, from unnamed teachers, Kainan wrote. A series of emails followed, the recipient list growing with every one. This was a mustering up of angry parents and their grievances, and the emails laid out in detail just how redress would be achieved. More allegations were lobbed, many of which concerned Redden. On May 22, Seth Berger wrote, the Redden War Report Twitter feed would support someone sick belief he is being unstable. Redden's Twitter account has since been deleted, but as Berger noted with horror, the top banner of Redden's Twitter feed is a picture of presumably his very young child holding an election ballot, presidential election, where they wrote in for President Assata Shakur, the exiled former member of the Black Liberation Army who was convicted in the shooting death of a New Jersey state trooper. Sam Levine also chimed in to say, I would like to see Redden terminated for cause. Kainan sent the letter to Randolph on the afternoon of May 22. The following morning, he and Levine met with Randolph. Later that same day, Randolph informed Redden that he would be placed on paid leave. In the evening, Kainan wrote another email to get the group up to speed. It now included over 4 dozen participants. In it, he summarized the meeting with Randolph. There is an atmosphere of tolerance for hate, which permeates only a narrow constituency at Riverdale, but that targets a specific community and enables the type of behavior that we experienced last week, Kainan alleged. Some students felt intimidated, and parents were upset at the insufficient response by Riverdale. But Randolph sees things as we do, according to Kainan, and is committed to addressing the issue at its source. A formal communication from Randolph would be forthcoming. In his email, Kainan also mentioned having complained to Randolph about 4 specific teachers. 2 sources told HuffPost that Dorfler and Redden made up half this quartet. The remaining 2 are current members of the Riverdale faculty. On May 29, as promised, school officials met with Levine, Berger and Kainan. In attendance from Riverdale were Randolph, Dan Rosen, Vice Chair of the Board of Trustees, who serves as a member of the Board of the American Jewish Congress and was appointed by former President Barack Obama to the United States Holocaust Memorial Council, and Weston, the Chair of the Board of Trustees, who, after leaving ABC News, landed a gig as an anchor for Bloomberg TV. The next day, Levine sent a lengthy email from his wife's address recapping the meeting. In the email, which was obtained by HuffPost, Levine wrote that while they'd made their feelings known in multiple previous meetings with the administration, concrete results were not achieved. The goal for this meeting was to ensure their demands were met. They included taking specific action with regards to Redden, addressing the climate of purported indoctrination by left-leaning members of the faculty, and preventing teachers from using their platform to promote personal ideology regarding the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, particularly when the topic is outside of the academic curriculum. This would be accomplished by way of a reworking of the school's current guidelines and policies, following the example set by the pending Anti-Semitism Awareness Act co-sponsored by Rep. Ted Deutsch, D. Florida, one of my closest friends, Levine wrote, and perhaps even inviting Deutsch to speak at Riverdale. Meeting with a small group of students who felt intimidated by certain teachers, holding training seminars for faculty members comparable to Starbucks' decision to close 8,000 stores that same day for racial bias seminars. Also, as was made clear at different points throughout the email, Randolph and Weston were in the parents' corner. Levine wrote, David Weston was very clear in his response, stating that there was no excuse for teachers to be using their platform of power to indoctrinate students with their point of view regarding Israel. David went on to say he wanted the school to have direct conversations with teachers to make clear that if they felt they could not stop themselves from this action, then they would not be allowed to teach at Riverdale, according to the email. Randolph, Rosen and Weston agreed that the Starbucks-like seminars were a good course of action, though the exact contours would need to be worked out. And plans for meetings between Randolph, Weston and individual students were already underway. Quote, after talking for 90 minutes, the meeting attendees shared moment of levity. As Levine described it, we explicitly said that we are not going away, emphasis in italics theirs, and wanted to remain engaged to make sure change is made, and David responded that after meeting us, he was quite clear we would not be going away. Levine also promised the parents that Randolph, Rosen and Weston are going to take real action, starting with a board meeting to discuss the parents' agenda. One parent spoke of teachers exacting retribution against students for disagreeing with a left-wing, anti-free enterprise, anti-Israel agenda. Berger, Kanan and Levine did not respond to a request for comment. I asked for comment from the Riverdale administrators, only to be handed off to a man named Michael McKeon. McKeon is a partner at Mercury, a lobbying and crisis communications shop. In a statement on behalf of the school, he wrote, at Riverdale Country School, we believe that there should always be robust dialogue and debate of different points of view. At the same time, all community members, students, faculty, and staff must be treated at all times with respect as outlined specifically in our principles of school life. When it appears that these principles may have been violated, we investigate immediately and take whatever actions may be required. I'd asked whether Randolph agreed there was a tolerance for hate at Riverdale, as Kanan's email indicated. McKeon wrote in response, at Riverdale, we are proud that we have created an environment of trust that encourages our students and facility to explore many points of view in an open and healthy way. To suggest Dominic, Randolph, or any school administrator would characterize the school's environment in any other way, and especially in the incomprehensible way Kanan's email does in your note, is simply wrong. Neither Levine's nor Kanan's emailed summaries of the meetings mentioned the alleged Islamophobia of the previous week. However, Levine did note that he looked forward to seeing many of the email's recipients at yet another, much larger, follow-up meeting on May 31st, which would be held at the American Jewish Committee, AJC, a pro-Israel and pro-Jewish non-profit advocacy organization and the former publisher of the neo-conservative magazine Commentary. For the New York Times, the AJC is widely regarded as the dean of American Jewish organizations, and according to the AJC's most recent publicly available tax return,